So our next presenter is going to be Miss Jewel Taylor along with Helene, and they're going to be talking about coping with stress. So I will briefly introduce Jewel. Jewel Taylor is a school psychologist with the Ministry of Education School Psychological Services, where she provides academic and behavioral testing for school-aged children in the Bahamas. Jewel is also the owner of Mosaic Therapy Services, where she provides teletherapy services to the adult population. Jewel is currently a member of the Bahamas Psychological Association and is the acting chairman of the youth division at her local church. Jewel is also the counseling director at the Bahamas Sexual Health and Rights Association. Jewel has her bachelor's degree in psychology and her master's degree in forensic psychology. So we now welcome Jewel Taylor to speak to us about coping with stress.
Hello, everybody. Let me quickly share my screen for one quick second. Okay, perfect. Okay, so good morning, everybody. So I will be speaking on stress and Helene will be speaking on coping with stress. So when we completely just dive right into it, stress is more so much, okay, so stress is more so much a reaction to tension or tough situations that we are currently experiencing. And those more so much reaction could be either mental or it could be emotional. And the thing about it is that we experience stress or stresses every day in our lives. And the thing about it is stress is a normal reaction to situations. However, stress can be bad when it is stress can be bad or unhealthy when it's more so much affecting your overall day-to-day living or your overall well-being. But when we look at it, stress can be perceived as both healthy and unhealthy. And that's where you get eustress and distress from. So eustress is more so much of the healthy stress, which looks at stress that, it encourages you, increases your energy, it is more so much of the stress that improves performances and things that you look at as a challenge. However, distress is more so much of the negative or the unhealthy stress where it depletes energy. It's more so much of extreme mental tension, and it's more so much looks at in forms of negative self outlook or negative self-worth, where you feel like you're experiencing stress and you more so much look at it as, this is all my fault, I did this, I can never do anything right or anything correctly. So when we continue to look at stress, as I said, the stress, we experience stress in our lives, on a day-to-day basis. However, stress is more so much linked to our subjective grasp or view on reality. And all that is basically saying is that, we all perceive stress differently, or we all perceive things differently. So the way I may perceive something may be completely different how Karen may perceive something, or Helene may perceive something, or I may say, oh, well, this is stressful, but somebody else could say, well, this is not, it is not stressful for me. However, our perspective on it will all be different. However, the perspective will be based off, our core beliefs, our own personal experiences, our day-to-day living, faith, and our own ability to cope, within ourselves and also within the community. So we are all, these are some ways in which we are affected by stress, whether we are being overwhelmed, confused, uncertain, fearful, anxious, don't know what's going on. However, what I want you to know is that these are all normal responses to abnormal or really stressful situations. These are all normal responses to abnormal situations or overwhelming situations. It's more like a reflex. So for example, let's just say like you leave like your mask, you might be like, oh my gosh, like I leave my mask home and now I have to go into the shop, now I have to turn back around, like this is just doing too much, or like I have to do too much. So it's like now I'm being overwhelmed and I have to, backtrack and do all these other things. However, that's more so much of a normal response to an overwhelming situation. So these are the more so much of the 3 different types of stress we'll be looking at, which are acute stress, episodic acute stress, and chronic stress. So when we look at acute stress is more so much of short-lived stress. So these are more so much stress that, happens more so much very quickly. The symptoms develop very quickly, and like it's more so much short-lived. So whether you are stuck in traffic, leave your mask at home, or, like make let's say like a small mistake, you could feel like fearful, anxious, uncertain, or and like all of those things. However, when we look at episodic acute stress, these are more so much of acute stresses that happens more frequently, and episodic acute stress is more so much developed when we have too much on our plate. So when we are taking too much different responsibilities from different places, and we are now stretching ourselves very thin. So, you're like, for example, your regular 9 to 5 job, and then you have like a side business, and then you have to come home, to tend to the home, and then you are more so much active in the community, whether it's at church or volunteering. And you know that all of these different things have different stresses. However, because you are now stretching yourself extremely thin or taking on so much responsibility, you will experience more of episodic acute stress. And then when we look at chronic stress, so this is more so much of prolonged and constant feelings of stress. So this is now when you are more, for lack of better words, engulfed in stress, like 24/7, or, for the majority of times of your life. So this could be, more so much of being in a toxic or an unhealthy household, or just being like in like a work environment that isn't conducive for your mental health. So these are some ways in which stress can definitely impact and affect us in different ways. So if we look at it from like a mental perspective, it's more so much geared towards our thinking. A lot of the negative self-thoughts, the worry and the indecisiveness, the forgetfulness, the panic. If we look at it from an emotional perspective, it will be more of the irritability, the depression, the anger, the loneliness. And when we look at seeing how that translates in our behavior, it'll look at, more so much of like being snappy or being isolative, or, loss of appetite, difficulty sleeping. And then when we look at it, from a physical perspective, it is more so much like, how is stress manifested physically? So when you get your headaches, or your migraines, your eyes hurting, your ears hurting, your body aches, that's what it definitely looks at. So now when we actually look at how stress is now seen in the classroom, we look at it from 2 perspectives. How can, if a child is stressed, like how does that look? And then also if a teacher is stressed, how does that look? So let's just say like a child is stressed from home, right? Okay, and he or she comes to school, and have to now participate in more so much school, and all this good stuff, right? Okay, so if he comes to school and was stressed by something was happening at home, he'll have difficulty concentrating because his mind isn't there. So if he's having difficulties concentrating, he will then have difficulties completing the assignments, which more so much will more so much affect, his ability to, do the work. So he'll now start to have academic or educational problems. His mood will definitely change. So it could be like increased like irritability, snapping, more so much of like that isolation, don't want to be around anybody or anything. And, anything can definitely now set him off. And then changes in his socialization. So not wanting to more so much hang with his friends who he normally hangs with, because he and or she is definitely feeling stressed. However, when we look at it from a teacher's perspective, let's just say like the teacher left her grade book home, or like her, I don't know, her lesson plan home, right? He or she left he or she left their lesson plan home. How will that then, look like in the classroom? More so much being lower engagement. Not saying that the teacher isn't engaged, but he or she will more so much put work on the board and say, hey guys, complete this work, or these are assignments, complete this, because the things which she have definitely prepared, unfortunately was left at home. Being on edge or not being more so much as focused in the class. So things that, what he or she would have been focused on before, it doesn't really bother at this point, because nobody is in imminent harm and or danger. So now, what I want us to look at is that every time we talk about stress, trauma normally gets involved in it in some way, shape, or form. However, trauma and stress is two completely different things, right? Trauma more so much looks at experiences that usually accompany a serious threat or harm to a person's life, whether it's their physical well-being. So a serious threat or harm to their physical well-being, whether it's themselves, their child, their spouse, or to a relative, or to a close friend, right? So now when we look at the difference between stress and trauma, we'll know that the main difference between stress and trauma is that all traumatic events are stressful. However, not all stressful events will be traumatic, because when we look at it, trauma more so much looks at, am I in physical or in imminent danger, like myself, my spouse, my partner, my kids, or, friends and our family. However, stressful events more so much looks at the emotional or mental response to things that we find overwhelming. So if we look at it, like, let's just say, for example, and trigger warning, like if somebody was in an accident, whether it was in like a motor accident, a boating accident, or anything of that nature, that event will be both traumatic and stressful, because their life could have possibly flashed before their eyes. They probably could have died. However, if we look at someone just being stuck in traffic, their life isn't in any danger per se. Things what they basically had to do or needed to be done, it will take longer because, they are stuck in traffic. However, they are not in any imminent harm and or danger. The second difference is that stress will not always be harmful, while a traumatic event could be harmful to a person's life, as explained before. And another difference between stress and trauma is time. If we look at it from a clinical perspective, more so much, if a person was to be diagnosed with PTSD, they would have needed to have those symptoms for more than a month's period of time. Whereas if we was looking at diagnosing somebody, let's say with acute stress disorder, those symptoms could possibly last between 1 to 15 days. So when we look at, the difference, all traumatic situations will be stressful, whereas not all stressful situations won't be traumatic. And the main difference is definitely time. So this is more so much of a stress and lying activity. Let me quickly pull it up. Okay, so what I want persons to do is I want persons to hold up both of their hands. Well, we can't see, but still hold up both of your hands. And I want you to put a finger up put a finger up if any of these statements apply to you, okay? And I want you to think about it basically in the past 2 weeks to a month period. Okay, so put a finger up if you recognizes what stresses you out, so you have a clear understanding of what your stress triggers are. Put a finger up if you have people in your life you could talk to if feeling stressed and overwhelmed. Now, these persons in your life, they do not judge, they wouldn't judge you, and they won't gossip about you. Put a finger up if you have coping or grounding skills when stressed. Put a finger up if you know how to use those coping and grounding skills now. Put a finger up if you have a therapist, mentor, spiritual advisor that you find counseling that provides sound wisdom when being stressed. Put a finger up if you practice self-care at least once per week. Put a finger up if you have a safe space that you can be yourself. And I say safe space, not a safe person. So this could be a room, a car, or any place where you could actually be yourself and not be judged. So you could be the true, vulnerable, authentic you. Put a finger up if you find yourself being joyful and or grateful for more than 75% of your week. And put a finger up if you haven't been stressed for the morning. I know I've been stressed, like, but okay. So as we all can see, if we could put in the chat, you know, the numbers of fingers we have up, everybody would have different amounts, where the persons have 8 fingers up, 5 fingers up, or 10 of their fingers up, you know, 3 of their fingers up, or so on. However, the more fingers a person have up, the better they deal with stress. And the less fingers a person has up means that they have more of a difficulty with dealing with and overcoming stressful situations. So when you see people having a moment, or, you know, just having like basically like a mental breakdown, don't judge them, but be empathetic towards their needs. And it's so ironic that last year we spoke on empathy, but you know, we all go through things differently. And if let's just say like I had all 10 of my fingers up, meaning that, okay, you know, when something stressful happens, my adaptability to that, or my resiliency to that, you know, I could easily bounce back, versus a person who have 5 fingers up. And you know, I just have to be empathetic towards their needs, because just because I do or experience things differently, it doesn't mean that, you know, how they are experiencing it or how they are perceiving it would be wrong. You know, just like was that I mentioned earlier, is that stress is more so much linked to our subjective grasp of reality. So if I could view something as differently, somebody else may view it as extremely stressful. So if they, you know, more so much if they, let's say, act out, for lack of a better words, due to that stress, I can't judge them for that. Okay. And now this leads us to resiliency. So basically, what is resiliency? And basically, like in layman's term, resiliency more so much is adapting to trauma and adversity we face. So every time I speak on resiliency, I normally tell persons, just imagine like a basketball, right? And you see, every time we push that basketball down, it literally always bounces back up and goes back up. And that's how, basically, that's what resiliency is. Your ability to adapt and bounce back in the face of adversity. It's like if life throw you something, you know, you could be able to adapt and come back and go harder. You know, if something else happens, you know, you could be able to adapt and come back even harder, and so on and so on. However, what I do want persons to know is that, you know, resiliency have to be maintained. So you know that, you know, like if you have a basketball and you never basically maintain it, you never clean it, you never wash it, you know, you never put air in it, you could just have like this dirty ball where it get flat over time. And that's the same thing basically like with resiliency. If you don't maintain it, you know, like if you don't maintain like your resiliency and you being able to adapt, you being able to bounce back, when you then bounce that ball, you know, it will, like, it wouldn't come back with as much as it definitely had before. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at, you know, how, like, what does it look like with maintaining resiliency? And before we go to that, resiliency is not a trait that persons are born with or have. It involves behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and developed by anybody. So how can we more so much build resiliency, or how can we maintain resiliency? We could do that by having like positive attitudes, finding good friends who we could be ourselves and be vulnerable with, friends who do not judge us, or friends who do not gossip about us or talk behind our backs. Do things that, you know, make us feel good and, you know, make us feel loved, seen, and heard, you know, feeling like you belong, building meaningful and supportive friendships, and definitely helping others or giving back. So more so much paying it forward. So thank you so much. So we'll now have Helene talking with coping with stress.
Okay, thanks, Jewel. And I just would invite you to kind of, you know, explore, you know, we're going to look at starting off with different coping mechanisms, right? And part of what, you know, Jules said was about bouncing back. So we're going to explore like how we can bounce back, how we can fill ourselves with that air or whatever it is we need to be able to bounce back. And she ended with talking about, how to become resilient. And they were all very positive things: staying positive, healthy relationships, doing things that we like. And I'm a positive psychology practitioner. And within the field of positive psychology, there's this belief in broaden and build. So when we think positive, when we nourish ourselves, we broaden. And so when we are dealt, when something stressful comes our way or there's a problem, we have a better ability to think creatively and to problem solve. When we are more narrowed, our ability to think and problem solve also narrows. So, what Jewel pointed out about resilience is really important when it comes to being able to cope with stress and find ways to identify healthy ways to deal with stress. So if you can go to the next slide, Jewel. So I invite you to kind of look here and see if you can identify with any of these unhealthy coping mechanisms. We've all had stress. Stress is a normal response to things going on in our lives, and we've all developed ways that we cope with stress. Negative self-talk, as Jewel said, you left your lesson plans at home. Today, I left my glasses at home. I was driving, it's like, oh, it's so stupid. How could I do that? Do you notice yourself, shaming yourself, blaming yourself? Sometimes we, work with these negative, or unhealthy coping mechanisms. That's kind of our fall too. Then we have some more healthy coping mechanisms on the next slide, which hopefully, you can identify yourself in some of these. And I tell people, students and adults, I wish I can wave a magic wand and take away your stress, but we can't do that. Stress is a normal part of life, but what we can do and have control over is how are we going to cope? What are we going to do? So I invite you to explore with me, some of these healthy coping mechanisms. So if you can go to the next slide. A big key is self-compassion, right? Knowing that self-talk, instead of beating ourselves up, treat ourselves as we would a friend. So I'm driving I got actually into my office, realized I didn't have my glasses when I looked in my bag. I was like, that's so stupid. They're there. How did I forget it? And instead, I wouldn't say that to a friend, like, you're stupid for forgetting your glasses. Hey, you had a busy morning. You were distracted by a phone call. It's okay. Also knowing that, we're not alone. Other people, have experienced things that we've gone through. And then just being mindful. What's really crucial with resilience is being able to notice, name, and navigate our feelings. And that's part of mindfulness. And that's hard at first, but the better we can develop being able to notice, name, and navigate, the more resilient we become. Next slide. So one self-compassion exercise is a hug. And many of us have been kind of isolated or on our own, or just not receiving the same amount of hugs. So I just invite you to hug yourself and notice how that feels. Just to give yourself a little hug, give yourself a little love. Havening is a kind of a form of hugging where you just take your hand to your shoulder and then just go down to your elbow, back up to your shoulder, and go down to your elbow. And kind of like rubbing a baby's back. And again, reminding yourself of all the wonderful things, and then the wonderful human being that you are, that we're not alone in this suffering, we're not alone in the world. And so again, just notice how that makes you feel. Another practice is just putting your hand on your heart and talking to yourself. Okay, or putting your hand on your heart and breathing. And again, notice how that feels. Okay, next slide. So hopefully you have done a little bit of that right now. An appreciation journal is to write down things that you appreciate about yourself and the good stuff. So I'm in my office now and I have a mirror, a self-appreciation mirror. And so on Post-it notes, I've written, I am strong, I love me, I can do it, I am smart. And I encourage students and teachers to look in the mirror and actually say that. And I do have these stickies, similar stickies on my mirror at home. So we can practice, speaking to ourselves as we do to a friend. Okay, next slide. And the same thing, we live by the water, and there's, shells and rocks. And so even just painting or writing something on a rock, I have something written on a rock that I keep on my desk at home, at work, you are strong. So again, having these constant reminders around us. Our brains are wired for negativity. We have a negativity bias. And so social scientists have said that it should be a 4 to 1. So if we say or hear something negative, there should be 4 positives. We can rewire our brains. We can rewire that self-talk. So having these little reminders around us help us to be able to do that. And that in turn helps us to, create that positivity and to be able to manage our stress. Okay, next. Again, treating yourself as a friend. If you, hear yourself having some negative self-talk, would I say that to a friend? What would I say? Journaling is so powerful. By writing something down, it goes into our subconscious and might pull up things that you wouldn't necessarily think of if you were not writing it down. So I encourage you to try, doing some writing. And then again, mindfulness is, not ignoring our thoughts, not ignoring our feelings, but noticing where in our body we're feeling it, naming it. I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, and then figuring out how to navigate it. Mindfulness is being present. It's being in the moment and choosing what you're going to focus on. So I always like to say, be where your feet are, right? So my feet right now are here. So I am here. I'm not thinking about what I'm doing, after the workshop. I'm not thinking about what I did this morning, but I'm being present. And that's a great way to start with being mindfulness, is living where your feet are. Okay. One way to practice that right here, if you can go back one slide. Again, I love the beach. I love the water. It's part of what's kept me here in the Bahamas, as well as the people, for 15 years, is decide what you're going to notice. Like, I love walking on the beach and just paying attention to the sand on my feet, or paying attention to the beautiful colors that I see around. So it's, again, paying attention, not letting your mind just go anywhere. So it's really a good practice to strengthen our focus. And then go ahead to the next slide, is the breath. Okay, and there's such power in breath. We can use our breathing to help release that stress hormone cortisol. We can use our breathing to slow down our nervous system. When we do feel stressed, this is part, I show out my students, this is our amygdala. This is the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala is where our feelings are. Prefrontal cortex is what we use to make decisions when we're in school, to think, learn, teach. And when we're overwhelmed by feelings, we cannot access that prefrontal cortex. So doing some breathing can help us. So if I just invite you to take a moment, if you want to, either hug yourself, put your hand on your heart. And when we breathe in, we're going to breathe in through our nose and feel our stomach expand like a balloon. So what we're doing is balloon breath. So you're going to breathe in through your nose, feel your stomach expand. And then we're going to breathe out through our mouth, and your stomach's going to deflate. So we're going to be like a balloon. Our breathing in is going to be for the count of 4. Our exhale is going to be for 6. When our exhale is longer than our inhale, that is when we slow down our nervous system, when we release the stress hormone. So I just invite you to breathe in for 4, 2, 3, 4, and out 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and in 2, 3, 4, and out 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I know that was quick, I just wanted to introduce that to you. There's a lot on the internet that you can find about mindfulness and breathing. For those of you that do work with children, there is a curriculum through on a website called Pure Edge, and I believe Miss Felicity can put that in the chat. But they have these great cards. So this is like lion's breath, and there's a picture of it, and then on the back is the instructions and even like when it's good to use. So I like using these cards for myself to teach myself breathing, and then to practice it with the students. And this self-compassion and this taking the time for ourselves to be able to cope with stress is such a gift we can give ourselves and to give our students. And I often think, boy, if I had these strategies and skills when I was in school, I would have saved myself a lot of stress and anxiety growing up. There's also a video, because we tend to, as Jewel pointed out, we tend to sometimes think of stress as negative, but there is something called good stress. Those of you that play sports or an instrument or perform or do public speaking, we often feel a little stressed before that. And that's what helps us to make sure we are at our peak for peak performance. So there's a YouTube video by Kelly McGonigal called How to Make Stress Your Friend. And I invite you to take some time and watch that, because it shifts your perspective a little bit. And she's done some studies that show how when you shift that perspective around stress, how that impacts our reaction to stress. Let's see, I see Miss Felicity. I think that is the link. Yeah, so that's the Pure Edge link. Yes, that is it. And that's a free curriculum for Pure Edge. They have a lot of resources. They have videos. I've done a whole lot of exploration over the years on this topic, especially since the pandemic. And that is one of the most user-friendly that I found for all age groups, from preschool up through grade 12. And so then the ones for grade 12, those of you working with adults, it's applicable for adults as well. And so I believe that's all I have. I don't know, Miss Karen, if you want to open it for questions.
Yes, so we will definitely be fielding questions now. So please make sure you type your questions in the chat group, and I will read them, and Miss Jewel or Miss Helene will be more than happy to answer them. So we have about 5 minutes for a question and answer period. So please feel free to put your questions in the group. I'll read you some comments while people take the time to write in some questions. So Joanne, during your presentation, she said she loves the sound of nature. Yvonne says, great suggestion. Kelly says, I like the hand over heart. And then there were some responses to your coping stress finger module, Jewel. And so we have a lot of 7s and 8s. So people seem to be in pretty good shape, unless everyone who had the 5s and 4s didn't want to put their numbers there. But we had some pretty high numbers for the stress module. Yvonne says, my gratitude diary has been a great stress relief at the end of each day. Wow, I've never thought about a gratitude diary. I think my stress reliever is turning on my AC, taking a shower, laying in my bed. Tanya Starbell says she liked the gratitude diary and she will try it. Are there any other suggestions, tools, or tips that you guys want to also present to the group, whether it be Helene, Jewel, or even any one of you participants who may have some things that you do for yourself that you can recommend to someone in the group who may benefit? You can also type that in the chat as well.
Can I just add one thing that the gratitude made me think of is also acts of kindness. Mm-hmm. So, being kind and doing kind things to others has also been shown to be a stress relief.
So original form, say play an instrument, sing aloud. Tanya Sawbell, the finger activity, please. You guys will be, once you complete the survey at the end of the workshop today, Ms. Charlene will make sure that you get a packet with the presentations. So you're gonna have all that information. So Ms. Charlene says she does a 4-7-8 breathing when I can't sleep. And ask Helene if you can model that.
So yes, is that like breathe in for 4, hold for 7 and out for 8? Is that, let me see, she said 4, 7, 8.
Yeah.
Okay, so sure, if I'll invite you all, we can try this together. And again, like the number counting it's good to build up. And because this is a time of COVID and COVID also affects our respiratory system, it is good to be able to build that breathing capacity because it builds our diaphragm. So it's like a win-win-win. All right, so we'll breathe in for the count of 4. We're going to hold for the count of 7 and then out for 8. And again, it helps me to put my hand on my abdomen. And the reason when you guys watch a baby sleeping, the baby stomach goes in when the baby breathes and out when they exhale. And we tend to not do that. We're not breathing properly. Okay, so we're going to breathe in. What do you say? 4, 7, 8. Okay, we're going to breathe in for 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and out 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so when you do out, I'm going to show you because people tend to get out by 6 or 4. So you make the out go. So you're really making the breath out. There's also a box one. So you can do like in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, in for 4. And you can do that and build up to even in for 8, hold for 8. So there's a lot with breathing. So was that good?
Yes, I thought that was a really good exercise.
Okay. So.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions, but like I said, if there are any more suggestions that you probably missed out in your presentation because of time constraints, this is definitely the time for you or Jewel to put in some more nuggets.
And Karen, there was some question about the anniversary of Hurricane Dorian coming up, September 1st, okay. and trauma. So I think, what Jewel said about, trauma, for those, any of you that have gone through the trauma or know people, it's, having that compassion, allowing for those feelings, noticing, naming, navigating, rather than trying to step it under. And my big thing would be to, if you or somebody else is, dealing with the result of the trauma due to the anniversary, is to find someone to talk to. A professional or, a lay person maybe at church, but to not sit with it alone and to, encourage somebody to talk non-judgmentally, not like, oh man, it's been 3 years, aren't you over it? Right. We need to be non-judgmental and accepting of any feelings and encourage people to open up and get help if they, find somebody to speak to. So in that, yeah. And I don't know if anybody, Jewel, if you want to add anything.
Oh yeah, and even to add on to what Helene's saying, being able to recognize, sometimes our trauma triggers or even our stress triggers, that is actually very important. Because like once we recognize, what could more so much take, knock us like down or, knock us from, what we were doing before, and actually see that it now, like we could identify with, some of our triggers, and then actually giving ourselves the space to actually feel some emotions, because feeling those vulnerable emotions are really tough, and sometimes like we don't have those safe spaces or safe people that we can normally feel those vulnerable emotions with all the time. So just allow yourself and give yourself the opportunity to feel those emotions. So recognizing your triggers, feeling those emotions, and definitely processing it. With processing it, it's acknowledging it, like acknowledging what's going on, feeling the emotions of what's going on, finding peace in the middle of what's going on, and definitely moving on from there. And with processing things, we normally think that, oh, well, once we process it once, like it's finished. But no, we just process one aspect of it. So to always acknowledge, recognize what's going on, process it, be vulnerable with yourself. I feel those emotions, like there are no good or bad emotions. Like sometimes it may feel overwhelming, or sometimes like we might want to feel those let's say soft emotions, or especially like for men, like they don't want to feel those soft emotions, or we sometimes can be emotional where we are. But give yourself the opportunity to feel those emotions, process what's going on, find somebody you could actually confide in, whether it's a therapist, like an advisor, like a spiritual mom, or dad, like a best friend who won't be able to judge you, but who will create this open, safe, non-judgmental space for you to be you, for you to just cry and go from there. And then always, what I always tell persons is that our feelings are so much communicating to us. So actually listen to see what your feelings is actually telling you. Like if you're feeling sad, or if you're feeling angry, what is this telling me? Do I have to check in with my boundaries? If I'm feeling lonely, okay, does this mean that I have to connect? If I'm feeling like I want to cry, what is this actually telling me? And definitely go from there.